chief science writer for MIT, engineer Dr. Eugene Mallove, has assembled the evidence that takes the illusion out of cold fusion.
When I finished my book Fire from Ice in 1991, I concluded that the evidence for cold fusion was overwhelmingly compelling. Today, we can no longer say that the evidence is overwhelmingly compelling. It is now 100% certain.
Technologies, which is published in New Hampshire, Concord, New Hampshire. My background is that of an engineer with 2 degrees in aeronautical and astronautical engineering from MIT and a science doctorate in environmental health sciences, air pollution control engineering, and aerosol physics from Harvard University School of Public Health. And after spending many years in the field of aerospace engineering and consulting, I began to write more about science and technology, and I found myself back at my alma mater, MIT, in 1987 as the chief science writer at the MIT News Office.
Had a Volkswagen Dune buggy operating on a fuel cell, 100% efficiency. So I went over to visit him and see his factory in Columbus, Ohio. He not only had cars and buses running on this fuel cell, he actually had a Commander 13-seat jet. So Stan Meyers said he wasn't too afraid of the powers that be, and he was going to go ahead and develop his fuel cells anyway, especially since he had discovered the frequency which would split water easily. But unfortunately, he was eating in a restaurant. He got up. He said, "I've been poisoned." He walked outside. He keeled over and he died. Within 2 years, we had lost 3 major inventors. We lost Bruce De Palma, we lost Stanley Meyers, and we lost Yull Brown. So even to this day, this fuel cell research is not strictly legal and not.
Met zijn water-powered auto naar buiten gereden, waar er nu wat over gediscussieerd wordt. En er zijn dingen aan gewijzigd en zo, dus het kan op het moment niet lopen, maar we mogen het dus wel helemaal bekijken.
Welding apparatus. So we bought his first hydrogen gas generator in the war. He started a factory in Sydney, and he started putting together hydrogen gas generators and selling them as a welding apparatus.
Okay, now this is the hydrogen computer system, which was designed in order to be able to process the fuel, to produce the hydrogen gas from water and do it economically and be able to control its firing, go in the engine to allow the Volkswagen engine to run off of hydrogen. There's a lot engineering design that went into this, even though that this is our systems engineering approach. The hydrogen computer system you see here will be miniaturized down to several IC chips, which will allow us to give the economics to apply to a conventional car. Over here, there's very unique design features that had to be developed in order to develop the water fuel cell as a retrofit energy systems to conventional cars. We had to go ahead and develop the laser, what we call the laser distributor, as you see right here, which is put between the conventional rotor cap and that of the rotor assembly. And primarily what this does, this sets up the electronic signals that goes back and triggers the computer system in order to allow the car to run successfully on hydrogen. In order to run this engine off of water, we've also had to learn the ability to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal the fossil fuels. We did this by simply now pulling off a portion of the exhaust gas that's coming from the engine, as you see through this tube here, that's going through this electronic regulator that's hooked up to the hydrogen computer. And basically what's happening is that as the ambient air is going into the engine and going through the burning process, it produces the non-combustible gases that retards the speed by which the oxygen atom unites to hydrogen and bring on gas ignition. So by simply using the non-combustible gases coming from the exhaust of the engine, we now modulate and control the speed by which that oxygen unites with the hydrogen, and therefore we are adjusting the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal that of gasoline or fossil fuels or even diesel fuel. And that gave us the number one retrofit capabilities of retrofitting the water fuel cell technology to an existing engine. And we do this electronically. The unit that you see right here, we call this a gas processor. And basically what we're doing is we're ionizing the ambient air gases that is now going into the process. And this allows us to trigger and use the hydrogen fracturing technology and tapping into a higher energy yield coming from the hydrogen. The unit you see right here, this is referred to as a resonant cavity. Water is now fed into the resonant cavity through this water tank, and as such, we now expose the water to a very high intense pulse voltage field and restrict the amps, and therefore the electrical polarization process now allows us to release the hydrogen economically from water. And by attenuating the voltage field, the amplitude of the voltage field, we now can control the rate of the production of the hydrogen gas on demand. So this is what's referred to as a constant demand generator. We also now extend or allow the voltage amplitude to increase even to a higher level and allow the water atoms to go into an ionization state, which gives us the ability even to produce a higher energy yield by producing more hydrogen gas on demand. So the fuel now coming from the water through the electrical polarization process going into resonance meaning that we're actually tuning into the dielectric properties of water, and it allows us to reduce amps down, flow down to a minimum, and allow voltage to take over that disassociates the water molecule on demand. And those fuel gases are now coming through this electronic injector system as you see here. So basically we're now feeding the ionized air from the gas processor. We're now also taking the water fuel gases that are now coming from ordinary water. We are now mixing it with the non-combustible gases and the ambient air gases and regulating those control of the fluid mediums or for fluid mediums. And as a result, now we can tune in and allow this engine to run off of natural water.
Had a Volkswagen dune buggy operating on a fuel cell, 100% efficiency. So I went over to visit him and see his factory in Columbus, Ohio. He not only had cars and buses running on this fuel cell, he actually had a Commander 13-seat jet. So Stan Meyers said he wasn't too afraid of the powers that be, and he was going to go ahead and develop his fuel cells anyway, especially since he had discovered the frequency which would split water easily. But unfortunately, he was eating in a restaurant. He got up. He said, "I've been poisoned." He walked outside. He keeled over and he died.
Nou, en wat heeft de consument nou aan de uitvindingen, wat we doen? Nou, dat is heel eenvoudig. We kunnen ze werkelijk gaan inbouwen. We hebben er werkelijk iets aan. En één zo'n systeem hebben we ingebouwd in deze Volvo. natuurlijk een benzinemotor. Je hebt dus niet benzine nodig in de vloeibare vorm, maar dat kan ook in gasvorm. En daar zien we dus dat gasvormig, als het eenmaal gasvormig is, daar kun je het wel mixen met water. Yes? No.
Defies all logic because the water, there's no water, there's no hydrogen, there's no oxygen going in. It is creating another form of energy that can't be explained scientifically as we know science.
Okay, that normally occurs 180 degrees and I'll still fly. Put the spark plugs back to sun and you're still running the car. But it did fly 180. No. I don't want nobody else touching the car.
Alright.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
We in neutral?
Yeah.
Joe is very sincere. He's very mechanically intuitive. He's not educated in a formal sense, but he has evolved his mechanical intuitions. From his perspective, he's assembling what he calls an octahedral magnetic field, which I would call phase conjugate. So the opposing conic approaches of magnetic flux lines creates a kind of conic center, what I call phase conjugate or implosive. So I have been teaching about how capacitors can phase conjugate, for example, how an egg makes life. He has done that magnetically.
Dit is dan een iets grotere motor. Dit is een 6-cilinder, 5,8 liter ongeveer. Het ding is 70 jaar oud en was met geen mogelijkheid aan te krijgen. Dus we hebben dus de carburateur hebben we eraf gehaald en gewoon, je hebt een gat hè. En in dat gat, daar moet iets in. Nou, dat hebben we dus gedaan met een halve liter benzine en 4 liter water ongeveer per uur. En daarmee loopt deze motor perfect op. Dus je ziet, ja, je hebt eigenlijk het geweld van benzine helemaal niet nodig. Maar het geweld van water schijnt dus veel beter te werken. Dus nou, als je dit soort machines dus aan kunt krijgen, dan volgens mij, ja, gebeurt er wel iets.
So the laws of energy conservation in combination with the laws of thermodynamics tell us that you can't get more energy out of a system than originally went into it. That's why these things just can't work.
It really doesn't make sense to me that this stuff could work. If you think about the water-powered car, for example, if you're splitting hydrogen and oxygen, burning it and getting water out the other end, you could make a closed loop where the water comes back into the system, and if you're getting more energy out than you put in, the thing will just run forever once you get it started.
Everything we know about the universe, and which is what science is about, trying to understand the way the universe works, the way the world works, everything that we know tells us that this is impossible.
Some of the guys who'd seen the car running think, oh, I think Joe must have put some petrol in there. He might have had some, he may have switched bottles, put another bottle in. And I said, but we passed that bottle around and took a drink out of it. It was just water in it.
Suffering from a kind of delusion, refusing to accept reality.
Question. Somebody mentioned that the magnets are actually in scale of what the moon is here. Is that correct? Or roughly?
With extreme magnetic implosion, he's actually able to make the impurities in the water vaporize in a magnetic vortex. I believe that does relate to the use of the Joe cell classically for hydrogen, in that the concentric rings of the metal cylinder that were used, he actually would identify which end of the metal pipe was extruded first in the process of manufacture, because there'd be a little bit of ion bias in the direction of magnetic line up and down that metal piece of pipe. And if you balance those perfectly end to end, the concentric pipes, you create a perfectly what's called phase conjugate, or what he calls octahedral magnetic fields.
I'd love to have a device like that in my backyard. You know, I wouldn't have to pay for energy ever again. But it's not going to happen.
I never could understand why, if we had the possibility of having free energy, why we had to have energy we paid for. But that's capitalism and where our consciousness is at the moment. With our original group that we formed, which was called ASTRO, Alternative Scientific and Technological Research Organization. And so we formed this in the early 90s, and our aim was to research a lot of the new energy that was coming out.
Coil to give our AC, you know, that AC high tension spark down to our leads, down to our spark plugs. Then it jumps across the spark plugs, and the engine won't fire unless the spark plugs are there to convert it back to DC charge. That's what the spark plugs are there for, because that AC spike don't fire the engine. Yeah. It's got to convert back across the plug and everything else, and it jumps from that high tension center lead across to ground negative, which is the other side of your spark plug, converts back to there, then your engine fires. Okay? But we can make that spark jump outside the engine, and your motor still fires even with a faulty spark plug. Stuffed up plug and everything, she fires on the inside of the engine. Yeah. But you go back to the original old, very, very, very early model flaming cars. Not many people know about them. I was just telling Peter here, I just witnessed one the other day again. DC magnetos, not AC, DC magnetos. They took a wire out of it and screwed it anywhere on the block, and the flipping engine fires from a 1 cylinder up to 12 cylinders or more. The engine fires, and there's no spark plugs. There's no distributors, no points, no condensers, and if you touch that lead from the DC magneto, you feel nothing. Yeah. It's like there's nothing there because it's flat-line
really
DC.
Improved what I've got, and I would be tickled to death to help them, but I'm doing real good with what we got. I'm planning on later on driving this across the state, but I don't know exactly right now when. Is when we get ready, we will do it, and there'll be a lot of people know about it when we go. It's called the Surge 1. The tag says Surge 1. We're very proud of this car. What I like about this car, this is an automatic transmission car where a woman or any young girl that's got driver's license can drive this car. All the other electric automobiles that I've actually seen has been nothing but just standard transmissions. And I know there's some ladies that have problems driving a standard transmission. Some of them are real good about it. A lot of them drive pickups. But now we developed a car that any woman can jump in this car and go to the grocery store and not have to worry about shifting any gears. There's not a whole lot of what you call junk, I would call, under cars. I've seen a lot of electric cars that had a lot of stuff in it. The only thing that this has a battery to run the radio, the blower. We've got 2 safety switches over here that can be mounted into an enclosed system, but we did this where you could see, where people can see this car with the technology. It's a safety switch system. This is a controller box, a Curtis control box. It cuts the amperage down. So with the amperage, here's what's real good about electric automobiles. All electric automobiles that has search technology with this in it they create heat. They've got to have a fan to blow this Curtis controller off because it gets hot. We don't want that to get hot. We want to stay that cold, because once it stays cold, you're saving on all the computer chips that's in this controller. So that means you can go farther, longer, and you don't have no problems. This electric automobile has got two gauges in front of the shifter on the automatic transmission. It's called the voltage and the amperage. That's what I was talking about earlier about amperage on automobiles. Let's see if we can't get the amperage to go down instead of going up. The voltage on this here should say somewhere around 120 volts. When we start out, there's no amperage at all. So the gauges is down below here, and we're getting ready to take and go drive the car, and you can see for yourself what it does. I've got three switches that I turn on. The key, I turn on one switch for the battery pack, and all you do is just take and put it in gear, and the motor sounds like a little sports car. Shifts, runs good, fantastic automobile. If you'll see the amperage on the gauge, see it going down? Amperage goes way down. That's what I like about an electric car. If you floorboard the car, the most it will do would just be about maybe 100 amps. And that's what we want to do. By floorboard the electric car, called the Surge, will not pull over a little over 100 amps. This is all automatic. You can start off dead. What you want in automobiles, you want to see this drop. That means if you go faster you drive this car, lower the amperage will drop. With the traffic, it's got overdrive in it. It's got passing gear. So it'll go anywhere really anybody wants to go. If you want to take a trip, you don't have to worry about it go plug it in the house, because it's called the Surge technology. It's a beautiful automobile, and I love it, and I've put a lot of hard work in this car, and we're going to make it. I want it where you can actually do this like go to a bank and borrow the money if you want to, or pay cash for it, and you got a car you ain't going to have no trouble with it. You don't have no oil, no gas to fool with. And I like about the new technology on the battery. That way you have no lead, and you can not have to go throw it in landfills. And the technology is here. See you around. This is
the GEAT fuel processor. A plasma generator similar to a supercarburetor that actually appears to run on 80% water and is entirely non-polluting.
This device replaces the carburetor and exhaust and combines them as one unit, whereas this end of it acts as a miniature refinery, allowing the engine to run on everything from battery acid and water mixed to crude oil right out of the ground. This is Angola crude, a 39.5 gravity. The exhaust coming down goes around and comes out here at the far end. The center chamber draws some of the heat from the exhaust, plus this tube takes some of the exhaust gases, takes them up into the chamber and bubbles them down to the bottom. The bubbles, as it comes through the fuel, are brought up to the top of the chamber, picked up through a tube, and fed up the center of the exhaust pipe. While they're being fed up the exhaust pipe, they are in a vacuum, and there's a heat exchange which occurs. This process has been argued a few times to be either a plasma field, an electro field. We do know that it does have a slight radiation, which is not alpha, beta, or gamma, and we do have x-rays to show that whatever is coming from the unit does get affected different from stainless steel than the regular steel. Go. When the temperature of the exhaust is the same as the air temperature going in from the air portion up here, normally 3% more oxygen coming out of the tailpipe than there is in the air we're breathing. And no carbon at all.
Carbon vanishes.
I wouldn't say vanishes, I would say transmuted into some other substance, a lighter element, because we have an abundance of lighter elements here.
That recognizes life. Another word for that would be plasma.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Plasma is recognized as the fourth state of matter. It was about 1983, I believe June of 1983 in Moscow. Scientists from all over the world all gathered to discuss whether or not they would accept plasma as that fourth state of matter. Because there were some that still were holding off, saying they didn't believe it was a state of matter. Well, after many weeks of arguing, they all concluded that plasma is in fact the fourth state of matter and should be recognized for that. They had then another week of lectures on plasma that went on, and the book of Al Bateman and Super High Frequency Plasma Generators was created there. One of the scientists that got up drew a picture. If you looked at that book, I think it's on about page 26, there's a picture of what he said was what the other scientists were saying was a plasma generator. And what they were saying was that as the plasma or fuel vapor is fed up into the tube, it has to be sealed off here and then put under a high amount of pressure and then bombarded with electrons so that when it was released at the other end, the new plasma fuel would come out and burn very efficiently. Well, one of the 600 scientists at that conference said, I believe you're all wrong. I believe if you use a vacuum to pull it into the chamber, that it would generate its own plasma field. He was laughed off the stage and asked to leave the conference. It was so preposterous. But the same week that that was happening in Moscow, I built the first blue engine, which is up against the wall over here, and it did run with a vacuum, and it was self-generated. I just didn't know it was called a plasma generator for 10 years.
Research for the Fuji Electronic Industries has constructed special instruments which translate the electrical output of plants into modulated sounds, giving voice to a cactus. Relying on her affinity for plants, Mrs. Hashimoto looks forward to actual conversation with her cactus. Convinced that it possesses an intelligence, she is determined to teach it the Japanese alphabet.
You know, there's no mixing of the words here. It's very, very clear what the African shamans, what knowledge and information they have held for a long, long time. And you can see the Eurocentric influence and the desperate attempts to destroy that knowledge and information by the Eurocentric history books that have replaced all the ancient knowledge, not only in southern Africa, but in all the native lands around the world when they were invaded some 500 years ago by those thugs from Europe. When they invaded the Americas, Africa, Asia, Australia, they did the same. They followed the exactly same plan of action. They invade, they take over the land, they kill all the knowledge keepers, they destroy all their written material or any kind of artifacts that they have that that contain information from ancient times, and that's how they create a species with amnesia, where you separate people from their ancestors.
He was, you know what I mean? He pulled me out there. We did a lot of work, and I found an herb that for every kilogram of this herb, you can yield 20 kilowatts, meaning you can power your home with a leaf. You hear what I'm saying? Do you hear what I'm saying? This is what is coming in your face. I ain't playing.
Hold up. A plant that can power your house, like with electricity, or
that's what 20. That's a kilowatt. See, he thinks I'm saying if you take it, say we say the body electric, so you know you're gonna get that. No.
Just freely giving it away. That we weren't selling it.
The engineer from Audi come across with a ASIO government fellow, what we know definitely is Australian ASIO government. They fronted wanted to see about me cells and everything else, so on like that. Spun him out in a couple of minutes too. You know, we've had Professor Ron Davis wanting to take out these cars. He took the first one. We never got it back or anything else. Mechanics, engineers, physicists, government people following you everywhere, bugging you, threatening you. Beyond 2000, we're going to do articles on me and everything else, and then when we get calls, somebody must have been bugging somewhere and going to send me kids back in the post to me if I go ahead with the story. So I said, stuff it, shut it down, not interested. Then they try and come and take your cars. It may be a simpler device when you figure out exactly what makes them go.
Good man.
And
All right.
then you don't need these cells, you just make that energy field some other way. But this is what they're playing with now, this is what's out there, this is what they want to learn about, it's what they want to do, so I'm just giving you a few other little funnies to go with it. That's all.
Yeah, so why do we put air in our tyres, Joe? Jock didn't have to.
No. These vehicles sort of cleared the ground, didn't need them. Whatever that is, that's a frequency field. You can't say the gas lifted him up, can you? Maybe.
Well, we can, but would they believe us?
No, it's probably
Did you
wrong.
put your hand under the tyre?
Yeah.
You did. Passed your hand.
Yeah. He was there, a few others are there. Starting the vehicle, run my hands, full hands, completely underneath the wheels and never touched the ground or the wheels. That was how far she was off the ground. Tractor on the back of the vehicle, she was off the ground. And then was able to drive, don't know how, but able to drive and turn corners on the road.
Yeah.
So answering that one, it shouldn't be on this tape, I suppose. Should be on the other one, but on something else. But if you only got this, you don't know about it. Well, I suppose you better chase up the other technology off Peter about the somebody about.
Blade me. Oh, you're nice.
I haven't got it. About the,
I wasn't there. I didn't
truck.
film it.
Well,
We'll have to go and talk to Jock.
let's get started.
Упала. Начинается опять. Выше не поднимается. Странно. Нижняя надкрылья тоже начинает ездить.
The story really begins in the late 19th century. Mathematicians had written down a formal description of what a curve must be, but within that description there were these other things that satisfied the formal definition of what a curve is, but were so weird that you could never draw them, or you couldn't even imagine drawing them. They were just regarded as monsters or things beyond the realm.
They're not lines. They're nothing like lines. They're not circles. They were like really, really weird.
The German mathematician Georg Cantor created the first of the monsters in 1883.
He just took a straight line and he said, I'm going to break this line into thirds, and the middle third I'm going to erase. So you're left with 2 lines at each end. And now I'm going to take those 2 lines, take out the middle third, and we'll do it again. So he does that over and over again. Most people would think, well, if I've thrown everything away, eventually there's nothing left. Not the case. There's not just 1 point left. There's not just 2 points left. There's infinitely many points left.
As you zoom in on the Cantor set, the pattern stays the same, much like the noise patterns that Mandelbrot had seen at IBM. Another strange shape was put forward by the Swedish mathematician Helge von Koch.
Koch said, well, you start with an equilateral triangle, one of the classical Euclidean geometric figures, and on each side I take a piece and I substitute 2 pieces that are now longer than the original piece. And for each of those pieces, I substitute 2 pieces that are each longer than the original piece. Over and over again. You get the same shape, but now each line has that little triangular bump on it. And I break it again, and I break it again, and I break it again. And each time I break it, the line gets longer. Every iteration, every cycle.
As normal geometry, 1 dimension is the straight line. 2 dimensions is, say, the box that has surface area.
And 3 dimensions is a cube. But could something have a dimension somewhere in between, say 2 and 3? Mandelbrot said yes. Fractals do. And the rougher they are, the higher their fractal dimension.
There are all of these technical terms like fractal dimension and self-similarity, but those are the nuts and bolts of the mathematics itself. What that fractal geometry does is give us a way of looking at, in a way that's extremely precise, the world in which we live, in particular the living world.
Mandelbrot's fresh ways of thinking were made possible by his enthusiastic embrace of new technology. Computers made it easy for Mandelbrot to do iteration, the endlessly repeating cycles of calculation that were demanded by the mathematical monsters.
The computer is totally essential, otherwise it would have taken a very big, long effort.
Mandelbrot decided to zero in on yet another of the monsters, a problem introduced during World War I by a young
Thousands of years, merchants used a strange yet very sophisticated system of multiplication to calculate the price of goods at markets throughout the Horn of Africa and the Middle East. Today, the price of Ethiopian coffee is calculated on cash registers. But where we in the West rely on modern technology, thousands of years ago, traders made their calculations with pebbles. All they needed to know is how to halve a number and how to double it. To Western eyes, the Ethiopian system is so strange that it seems more like a magic trick. To multiply 11 by 15, put the numbers into 2 columns. Keep halving the number on the left, ignoring all fractions. 11 becomes 5, becomes 2, until you reach 1. In the other column, you double. 15 becomes 30, becomes 60, becomes 120. Whenever an even number appears in the halving column, ignore the row. Group the remaining beans in the doubling column together and count. You get 165, the perfect answer. It seems unbelievable that a system can ignore fractions, even throw away parts of the calculation, and still come up with the right answer. But it works every time.
And I'll show you how that works. Today, when we write a number, we work in powers of 10 and place value. We have the ones, the tens, the hundreds columns. So if you wanted to say 472, we're really saying 4 100s, 7 tens plus 2 ones. But the way that this occurs in modern computers is not place 10 value, but place 2 value. So their powers are 1s, 2s, 4s, 8s, 16s, and so forth. So if a computer wants to think of the number 16, let's say, well, if a computer wants to look at the number, let's say 14, it's 1 8, 1, 4, it's 12, 1, 2, and no ones. This kind of arithmetic is appropriate for computers because they deal with electricity, which can either be on, represented by 1, or off, represented by 0. The flow of electricity or no flow of electricity. These powers of 2. Now, the way the ancient Egyptians developed this can be seen in the way that they would multiply. Now, neither the ancient Egyptians nor the modern computers use a times table. Times table is something we teach children in school, and it has to be memorized. But it's really inappropriate for a computer. And I'll show you how, for example, that works. The modern computer designers, as well as the ancient Egyptians, were aware of a mathematical fact that any number can be shown to consist of the sum of powers of 2. What I mean by that is if we write the powers of 2, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so forth, you notice there's a doubling going on. And any number can be represented by the sum of these. For example, if we wanted to choose the number 17, it's 16 plus 1. So I can count 1, 2, 1 plus 2 make 3, 4, 1 plus 4 make 5, 2 plus 4 make 6, 1 plus 2 plus 4 make 7, 8, and so forth. And so any number can be represented by this, the sum of elements of this sequence. So if I wanted to multiply two numbers, let's say we wanted to multiply 17 by 25. In order to multiply the way the Egyptians did and the way that computers do, all you have to know is how to double numbers like this and how to add two numbers together. No multiplication table needed to be memorized. So 17 times 25, I've identified the elements of 17 as 1 plus 16. And in this column, I write the number 25, and I just keep doubling it. Twice 25 is 50, twice that, 100, twice that, 200, twice that, 400. So in order to know the product of 17 times 25, we just have to look at which numbers are circled over here and circle the corresponding ones over here and add them together. So 17 times 25 is 400 plus 25, or 425. It's that simple. No memorization, no times table, no tears in the third grade about this. And this is how computers do it as well, except instead of circling or not circling a number, they would have a 1 or a 0. So in other words, the number 17 in binary arithmetic by computers is 10001.